It was supposed to be a short trip, just a quick drive up to the old family cabin in the mountains for a weekend away. Alec had convinced his younger brother Danny and his best friend Jake to come along, promising the peace and quiet would be worth it. The trio had grown up together in a small town and shared a lifetime of memories, but life had separated them over the years. Alec thought a weekend at the cabin might rekindle their bond. The journey started smoothly, with laughter and reminiscing filling the car. They were driving Alec's old truck, a vehicle that had been around longer than Danny's entire lifetime. It was sturdy and reliable, or at least, Alec thought so. As they climbed into the mountains, however, the truck started to make a strange knocking sound. Jake, ever the car expert, furrowed his brow. "That doesn't sound good, Alec. When's the last time you had this thing checked out?" "She's fine," Alec replied with a wave of his hand, though he sounded unsure. "It's probably just the altitude or something." They continued on, but soon the knocking turned into sputtering. The truck slowed, then stalled altogether, rolling to a stop on a narrow mountain road flanked by dense trees. "Well, that's not good," Danny muttered, glancing out the window. The silence around them was thick, punctuated only by the faint rustling of leaves. Alec tried turning the key in the ignition, but the engine only sputtered. Jake climbed out of the truck, popped the hood, and took a look. "This thing is toast, man. I think it's the fuel pump or something. We're not going anywhere without getting it fixed." Alec sighed, slumping against the hood. "Great. Just great. I knew I should have gotten this checked before we left." Danny looked at his phone, but there was no signal. "We're stuck here. How far are we from the cabin?" Alec checked the map on the dashboard. "About 6 miles, not too bad. We could walk it." "Walk it? Through the woods?" Danny didn't look thrilled, but he wasn't surprised. Alec had always been the adventurous one, dragging them into things they'd never choose on their own. Jake shrugged. "It's either that or spend the night in this truck. I'm up for a hike if you guys are." With little choice, they grabbed their backpacks and set off down the road, which wound through thick forests and steep slopes. They hadn't been hiking long before they realized that what they'd expected to be a straightforward journey was anything but. The trail was rough, overgrown, and twisted in unexpected directions. The dense trees blocked much of the light, casting long shadows that made it hard to see very far ahead. The further they walked, the more they realized just how isolated they were. They kept to the road at first, talking and joking to keep their spirits up. But as the sun dipped lower, the chill of the mountain air began to set in, and an eerie silence fell over the forest. "Are you guys sure this is the right way?" Danny asked after an hour of walking. He glanced around, feeling like the trees were closing in on them. Alec frowned, consulting his map. "I think so. The cabin should be straight ahead, but maybe we could cut through this trail here to save time." Jake raised an eyebrow. "I don't know, man. We're already lost enough as it is. Wandering off the road might make things worse." Alec hesitated, but his impatience got the better of him. "Come on, Jake. You wanted an adventure, didn't you?" Reluctantly, Jake and Danny followed as Alec led them down a narrow path that veered off the main road. The trail was rugged, winding through dense underbrush and over uneven ground. As they pressed on, the trees grew thicker, the path narrower. Just as Alec began to doubt his decision, they stumbled upon a small clearing. There, nestled between the trees, was a dilapidated cabin, much older and smaller than the one they were looking for. It looked abandoned, its windows broken and its wooden walls weathered by years of neglect. "Is this it?" Danny asked, clearly hoping the answer was no. Alec shook his head. "Number, this isn't our cabin. But it could be a place to rest for a bit, maybe get our bearings." They approached the cabin cautiously, peering through the broken windows. Inside, it looked empty, save for a few old, rusted tools and a rickety table. The air inside was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and decay. Better than nothing, I guess, Jake muttered, setting his pack down on the floor. But let's not stay here too long. Alec took out a small flashlight, the light cutting through the dim interior. The cabin was eerily quiet, and as he scanned the walls, he noticed strange markings scratched into the wood, symbols and words in a language he didn't recognize. "Hey, look at this," Alec said, shining his light on the markings. "What do you think these mean?" Danny squinted at them. "Looks like someone's idea of graffiti." Jake shivered, feeling a sense of unease. Or a warning. Either way, let's get out of here soon. As they settled in, a strange sound echoed from the forest outside, a low, guttural growl, followed by the snapping of twigs. The three of them froze, exchanging worried glances. "What was that?" Danny whispered, his voice barely audible. They listened, straining to hear over the pounding of their hearts. The growling grew louder, closer, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps. "All right, this is getting weird," Jake muttered, standing up. "Maybe we should head back to the truck." But before they could move, the cabin door creaked open, revealing a dark figure standing in the doorway. It was a man, dressed in tattered clothes, with a wild look in his eyes. He looked at them with an unsettling intensity. "What are you boys doing here?" he asked, his voice rough and gravelly. Alec, taken aback, stammered, We got lost. Our truck broke down. We're just trying to get to our cabin." The man narrowed his eyes, stepping inside. "This ain't a place for tourists, not at this hour." The three friends glanced at each other, unsure how to respond. Danny tried to sound friendly. "We're sorry if we're trespassing. We'll leave right away." The man shook his head slowly. "The forest doesn't like trespassers, especially those who wander off the path." Alec swallowed, feeling a chill run down his spine. "We didn't mean any harm." The man stared at them for a long moment, then sighed. "Come with me. I'll show you a shortcut back to the road, but stick close. You don't want to get lost out here." Reluctantly, they followed him, stepping out of the cabin and into the dense forest. The man led them down a narrow, winding path, moving with surprising speed and agility. He didn't speak, and the only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a branch. The darkness felt oppressive, the trees towering over them like silent sentinels. Alec couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking their every move. After what felt like an eternity, the man stopped. He pointed ahead, where a faint light glowed through the trees. "There's your road. Follow it, and you'll find your way back." "Thank you," Alec said, though his gratitude was tinged with fear. "We appreciate it." The man nodded, his face unreadable. "Be careful on these roads. The mountains don't take kindly to those who wander unprepared." With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving them standing in silence. The three friends hurried toward the light, relief flooding through them as they stepped back onto the familiar road. They made their way back to the truck, exhausted and shaken. As they climbed into the cab, Alec looked back at the dark forest, a sense of unease lingering in his gut. "Do you think he was real?" Danny asked quietly, breaking the silence. Jake shrugged, his face pale. "I don't know, but whatever that was, let's never come back here." They drove back to town in silence, each of them lost in thought, the memory of the strange man and the eerie forest etched forever in their minds. It was a journey they would never forget, a reminder that some places were better left unexplored. When Elijah received his grandfather's journal, he had no idea it would lead him on the greatest adventure of his life. His grandfather, Henry, had been a wanderer, a quiet man with endless stories and a knack for finding oddities wherever he went. Elijah, always fascinated by his grandfather's tales, was left with one final mystery after his passing. an old leather-bound book filled with cryptic notes, maps, and references to a hidden treasure in the secluded area known as Hollow Ridge. Elijah shared the discovery with his two closest friends, Jacob and Marcus. They were practically brothers, having spent their childhoods together exploring every forest, river, and hillside within 100 miles of their small town. The three friends were inseparable, and the thought of uncovering a hidden treasure brought back the thrill of their younger days. They gathered one evening in Elijah's garage, poring over the journal and studying its strange sketches and writings. "Are we really doing this?" Jacob asked, looking up from the faded map in the journal. His voice held a mix of excitement and doubt. "Why not?" Marcus replied with a grin. "We've been looking for an adventure for years. Here it is, handed to us by Henry himself. Besides, it'll be fun, even if we don't find anything." Elijah nodded, determination in his eyes. If there's anyone who could hide a treasure, it's Grandpa Henry, and if there's anyone who could find it, it's us. So, with their decision made, the three men packed their bags, loaded up on supplies, and set off early the next morning. Hollow Ridge was a rugged, isolated stretch of land on the edge of town, filled with steep cliffs, thick woods, and countless hidden creeks. Rumors of strange happenings and odd sightings had surrounded it for years, making it the perfect place for a hidden treasure. As they hiked into the ridge, they followed the journal's map closely. The first clue was a drawing of an old, gnarled tree with a hollow at its base. After hours of trekking through the thick woods, they spotted the tree just as it appeared in the drawing. "Look, there it is!" Elijah shouted, his heart racing as he jogged toward the ancient tree. Jacob and Marcus followed close behind, equally exhilarated. Inside the hollow, they found an old tin box wrapped in cloth. Elijah carefully opened it, revealing a yellowed note written in his grandfather's handwriting. "Seek the rock shaped like a hawk's beak, facing east. Dig at its base, and the path shall reveal itself." The three exchanged excited glances. "This is incredible," Marcus said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It's like a real-life treasure hunt." They continued their journey, each step bringing them deeper into the wilderness. By noon, they reached a rocky area on a small hill, with boulders scattered around like giants' toys. Elijah pointed out a peculiar rock formation, a large stone that jutted out, its peak shaped uncannily like a hawk's beak. "That's gotta be it," he said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. They dug at the base of the rock with the small shovels they'd brought. After only a few minutes, they uncovered a wooden box, carefully wrapped in cloth to protect it from the elements. Inside was another note, along with a key and a small map marking a location deeper in the ridge. "Henry was a genius," Jacob murmured, shaking his head in amazement. The sun was beginning to set as they pressed on, determined to complete the journey. They followed the map to a narrow valley with sheer cliffs on both sides. The sound of running water echoed through the air, and they soon spotted a small waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. According to the map, the treasure was hidden somewhere behind the waterfall. Without hesitation, Marcus led the way, and the three waded through the cold water, slipping behind the curtain of the falls. They emerged into a small cave, dark and damp, with walls covered in moss and lichen. Elijah pulled out a flashlight, shining it on the cave walls. At the back of the cave, they found a large chest, its surface worn and faded. Elijah inserted the key into the rusty lock and, with a click, opened the lid. Inside, they found an assortment of items, gold coins, some small jewels, and a few documents, all carefully preserved. "Wow, it's real," Jacob whispered, reaching out to touch the coins, feeling the weight of history in his hands. Elijah found another note tucked between the papers, written in his grandfather's unmistakable scrawl. "To my dear grandson Elijah, if you're reading this, you've proven yourself worthy of the legacy I've left behind. This treasure is a collection from my travels, but its value is not just in gold or jewels, It's in the adventure you took to find it. Remember, the real treasure is the journey. For a moment, the three friends stood in silence, feeling the weight of Henry's words. So, what do we do now? Marcus finally asked, breaking the silence. Elijah smiled, pocketing a single gold coin as a keepsake. We take what we need to help our families, but we leave the rest here. This treasure isn't about wealth, it's about honoring Grandpa's legacy. They agreed to split a small portion of the treasure, just enough to ease their financial burdens, and leave the rest hidden in the cave. They secured the chest, replaced the cloth, and closed the cave as best they could. As they trekked back through the ridge, the excitement of the treasure hunt began to fade, replaced by a deeper sense of appreciation. The journey had brought them closer together, reminding them of the strength of their friendship and the legacy they each carried from their own families. By the time they reached the edge of the ridge, the sky was dark, and the stars glittered above like a million tiny treasures scattered across the heavens. They made their way back to Elijah's house, where they shared a quiet meal, reflecting on the day's adventure. In the days that followed, they each used a portion of the treasure for small, meaningful goals. Elijah put his share toward fixing up his grandfather's old house, ensuring it would remain in the family for generations to come. Jacob, who had been struggling to start his own business, used his share to get his dream off the ground, honoring the hard work and sacrifice his parents had put into raising him. Marcus, always the wanderer, used his portion to travel, fulfilling a dream he'd had for years, carrying his memories of Hollow Ridge with him wherever he went. The three friends stayed close, bound not only by the treasure they'd found, but by the journey they'd taken to uncover it. Every so often, they would meet up, share stories, and laugh about the adventure that had changed their lives. Years later, when Elijah had a family of his own, he would often take his sons up to Hollow Ridge, showing them the map, pointing out the landmarks, and telling them the story of their great-grandfather's treasure. He never told them exactly where the treasure was hidden, leaving that part of the mystery for them to discover one day, if they ever felt the call for adventure. For Elijah, the true treasure was in those moments, standing in the woods with his friends, feeling the thrill of the unknown, and discovering the legacy his grandfather had left. It was in the quiet moments of friendship, the lessons learned along the way, and the realization that sometimes the most valuable things in life couldn't be held in one's hands, but were instead carried in one's heart. And so, the legend of Henry's treasure remained, passed down through the generations, each telling keeping the spirit of adventure alive for those willing to seek it. The lost treasure of Hollow Ridge became a family story, a tale of friendship, loyalty, and the search for something far greater than gold or jewels, a journey of self-discovery, and a reminder that some legacies are meant to be found, not for the riches they bring, but for the wisdom they leave behind.